Hi everybody. Welcome to this new webinar that will focus on video conferencing versus video recording. We're going to take a look at the pedagogical comparisons and best practices. This webinar is going to build upon the previous CELT/e-learning webinar about teaching and active learning with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. My name is Dr. Colin Walker. I'm an interim training specialist for the Center for E-Learning and for the Center of Excellence in Learning and Teaching. I'm an assistant professor of digital production in the Department of Communication Arts here at Valdosta State University. To start off this webinar, we are going to look at a predictive learning strategy. So what I would like all of you to do is take 5 minutes to think about and write down one benefit and one shortfall for teaching with video conferencing, as well as one benefit and one shortfall for teaching with video recording. When you think about video conferencing, this is when you are live with your students, let's say through Microsoft Teams or Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. Video recording would be when you record a video that your students watch later on. So take 5 minutes and please complete this activity. Make sure that you hold on to those benefits and shortfalls to reflect later on in this webinar. For today, the 4 learning outcomes for this webinar are that I would like you all to be able to describe the benefits and shortfalls of video conferencing versus video recording. Next, identify best practices for how and when to use one modality instead of the other. Then, evaluate your skill levels for making video recording lectures and to recognize how to increase in skill. And then finally, to demonstrate active learning strategies for teaching with video recorded lectures. Next, we're going to take a look at the necessary technology to make this all happen. For today's webinar, make sure to have these pieces of technology available to you. First, make sure that you have a desktop or laptop computer for use. I would not recommend viewing this webinar on a smartphone or tablet. Next, make sure that you have a high-quality working internet connection. And then finally, make sure that you have access to Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, Microsoft Teams, and/or Kaltura, which is a learning tool provided by Valdosta State University. Next, we're going to take a look at why we should consider teaching and learning with video. So when considering to teach and learn with video, there's a lot of advantages for all of us, whether you teach high-flex courses, whether you teach fully online, or if you are teaching face-to-face and trying to add some more engaging components. So first, in this time, the use of video is allowing for us to maintain social distancing while teaching our face-to-face courses. Some students may be remote during class sessions while other students are face-to-face. These are some of the foundational elements of what we call high-flex teaching. Next, the use of video applies to both asynchronous and synchronous online teaching. So make sure to think about how you can maybe use it in that way throughout this webinar today. Another reason to use video is that it allows us to create more engaging courses. So maybe not being so text heavy where you're asking students to frequently read chapters of a book or read text off a screen. In addition, it can allow for a lot more entertaining elements inside of your respective course. Next, you can also leverage video that's already heavily used by college-age students on their cell phones and/or circulated via social media. So in some instances, you might be able to link to outside videos. We'll speak about some strategies for how to best do that later on. And then finally, it encourages us to be innovative as instructors with our use of technology. Don't be worried. This is not going to be too complicated when it comes to working with video. I will work on providing some tips and tricks along the way to assist you all with this process. So here at Valdosta State University, we have multiple options when it comes to video conferencing. The two that are fully supported by VSU are Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, which is supported through the Center for E-Learning here at VSU, and then Microsoft Teams, which is supported by the Department for Information Technology here at VSU. Yes, other options are available, however, they are not supported at this time at the university. So as you see here, there are a lot of benefits of teaching with video conferencing. First, it allows for multi-mediated synchronous learning. So you see, it can be used in so many different modalities, whether it be face-to-face, high-flex, or fully online. For example, consider that maybe you are actually trying to bring in a guest speaker, and that could be used during a face-to-face class session. that allows for experts that are all over the world to come right into your classroom at the click of a mouse, which can create a really engaging experience for a lot of your students. It also allows for us to maintain that social distancing, as we spoke about earlier, with our students who are remote in the high flex environment. And then it allows for the incorporation of a lot of different media in a fully online course. Before you get into video conferencing, though, one recommendation I do have is to consider incorporating a low-stakes assignment to show that students can access and perform actions inside of platforms such as Collaborate Ultra or Microsoft Teams during the first week of class. This can help build a routine for your students and allow for questions to be asked early in the course rather than waiting until later in the semester when it could prohibit a student from completing his or her own work. Next, with video conferencing, it can engage the students with the course content. Again, this is where if you have an expert from outside of the university who maybe speaks with your students in the classroom, it can allow them to ask questions to another person that they may not wanted to have asked you as the instructor, or maybe they say the guest speaker says something that is really thought-provoking for the students, which can lead to an enriching experience. Also, if you're online or high flex, it's really important to keep that connection with your students. So with video conferencing, it can create a community in your course and sort of humanize it for your students a bit too. It's going to allow for you to sometimes post short updates and, let's say, announcements on BlazeView, and you can just do that simply with your phone, or even a webcam as well, as I'm doing here today with this webinar. It also provides students opportunities for them to connect with each other when working on the same or similar content as well. You don't need to facilitate all of these discussions all the time. You can actually create channels or rooms, depending on which platform you're using, to allow the students to speak with one another and actually see each other. This allows students to have a common form of communication that's not limited by what kind of cell phone you have. For example, with FaceTime, if let's say you have iPhones, which sometimes is going to leave out the Android users, which many of our students have here at Valdosta State University. Video conferencing also provides supplementary material for group work as well. So it allows for students in some instances to be able to provide presentations, let's say, via video in a live environment. So it introduces a lot of options for our students to build a 21st century classroom at an institution such as Valdosta State University. Next, we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls that are also related to teaching with video conferencing. Although we have a lot of benefits of teaching with video conferencing, unfortunately, there are pitfalls as well. So first, you may have technology or even accessibility hurdles, such as making sure there's a working internet connection and that your students have a webcam. So when it comes to the internet connection, I would recommend that your students hopefully have about 5 megabits per second or more in terms of their bandwidth. This is the internet plan that students are paying for. Unfortunately, if students have a bandwidth connection that is lower than this, then it's going to become really difficult for them to stream video. So make sure to keep that in mind when you are teaching, that you don't try to play videos inside of a live video conferencing session. I would strongly recommend making those available for students to view in their own time, or ask them to open up a link on their own computer. When it comes to a webcam, It can be difficult for some students to find webcams. Okay, I would actually say I even have a webcam that just came in that took almost 6 months to be delivered. However, there are ways for students to be able to plug in their phones to make those into webcams. But keep in mind there are privacy concerns related to webcams as well. So make sure to speak with your students about your expectations, but be open to feedback from them if they have concerns related to that topic. Next, while teaching, sometimes it can be difficult to hear or even see the students if they don't turn on their mics or cameras. So this is where you want to make sure that you build a routine with your students. For example, some teachers have asked the students to turn on their webcams while speaking to establish a visual connection. Other teachers have asked that students raise their hand before speaking. That way they can make sure that the only student's microphone who's open is the student who raised their hand to speak. Next, make sure that you post resources that are going to be used in class sessions at the start of class and/or type that into the chat session. That will help expedite the process of teaching. Unfortunately, when you're doing live video conferencing and teaching, trying to prepare things on the fly is most likely not going to work. So you are going to have to prep a lot more stuff in advance to have a smooth experience in this style of teaching. You also need to make sure that you integrate active learning strategies, or else the students can become distracted, bored, passively watch. They might even start ghosting you in a way. So we're going to talk about some strategies later on in this webinar to work on engaging your students. Next, it can be difficult to track attendance, especially with larger class sizes. There are ways around this where some of the platforms do record who logs in during each class session, such as Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. Another strategy is that you could screenshot the list of attendees in each one of these platforms as well. And then finally, make sure that when you are teaching with video conferencing, that you establish the relationships between the content and the assignments. Okay, so this is a recommendation from the Who Knew It platform that you all have access to here at Valdosta State University. You want to make sure that the students understand why are they doing what they're doing, and make sure that the assignments do tie back to the readings that maybe you ask them to do and/or the lessons for class on that particular day. These should make a lot more of your teaching experiences smooth. So next, we're going to speak about video recording. So on this slide, you're going to see a list of options for video recording here at VSU. You'll also see which ones are supported as well. So first off, there's Kaltura. Kaltura can be accessed via BlazeView. Support for this service is provided by the Center for E-Learning here at VSU. Next, we have Adobe Premiere Pro. This one is going to be more so likely used for editing your videos. There are workshops offered by the New Media Center, so make sure to contact them if you would like some assistance or you want to sign up for a workshop. And then finally, you can use your cell phone to do a lot of the video recording. Remember, try to relate with your students a bit. You see how a lot of them are communicating with things like FaceTime and things of that nature. Sometimes you can create a short video using your cell phone that's just a minute or two long to help get the message across to your students. So next we're going to talk about the benefits of teaching with video recording. As you see here, there are a lot of benefits of teaching with video recording. So first off, it allows for asynchronous learning, whether it be in a flipped face-to-face classroom situation, or fully online, or even in some instances, high flex. Also, when you are teaching with video recording, it's not dependent on internet speeds most of the time. The reason for saying most of the time is that if the students can only stream the content, meaning they hit the play button in a learning management system such as BlazeView, then in those instances, it does matter how quick their internet speed is. But if you allow your students to download the videos, then after they've downloaded it, they can view it on their own time, whether they have the internet or not, which can be really beneficial for some students who have poor internet connections in some areas. It also allows for students to be self-paced with their learning. We all have competing schedules, and students know their schedules better than we do. So in some instances, it's good to allow the students to chunk out when they're actually going to review content related to class, whether it be at 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock in the evening. Video recording is also going to allow you to structure your content with the control of time. So you decide how short or how long a video is going to be. We'll provide some tips later on for timing recommendations. It also allows us to build community between ourselves as instructors and the students to personalize the learning experience. Videos created by others are not going to be able to help build that sense of community. At times, they can be used to support topics that are being discussed, but a lot of our students look up to us as the experts. So you want to take time to build these videos. A nice thing too is that you can reuse these videos later on or even augment them a little bit if you need to change something, if there's a development in your field of research. And finally, video recording is going to allow us as instructors to be more dynamic with our videos. We can also embed active learning activities inside of these videos as well, which we are going to discuss later on. So some of these benefits were provided by the Who Knew It instructional video best practices. I would recommend reviewing this module in Who Knew It if you would like to get more information about any one of these topics listed here today. Similar to video conferencing, video recording also has some pitfalls when you are teaching using this tool. So first, teachers, we got to make sure that we integrate active learning assessments, or else our students are going to get distracted, bored, or maybe even passively watch the video. They need to understand that there's a purpose to watching the video and or what the outcome is after reviewing the video. Is it tied to an assignment? Is it going to allow them to learn a new technique or concept that's going to help them complete a specific assignment? This is information that you should communicate to your students. Next, videos need to be short and succinct. Okay, so make sure, try to have your videos be between 5 and 15 minutes. Avoid having videos that are longer than this duration. In all honesty, most students will not watch beyond these times. Also, this helps students structure out their time. If let's say they have 15 minutes available here and there, then they're more likely to watch these short videos. However, if you have a video that's going 1 to 2 hours in duration, well, it might be hard for students to chunk out that much content in their day, or they're going to hit pause and then come back to it later on, and they might lose some of the connections that you are attempting to make in your video. So one recommendation when it comes to making these videos short and succinct is either consider having a script available to you or outline the certain points that you want to get across in each one of your videos. You'll also find that if you record shorter videos, it makes them a lot easier to edit later on. You don't have to necessarily record the video 5 to 15 minutes simultaneously. Some of you have probably noticed here that I'm recording short videos for each one of these slides. So that can make it a little bit less intimidating to try this sort of technique with video recording. Also, if you make a mistake, you can simply edit and/or re-record. One other pitfall of teaching with video recording is that there can be a delayed response time from the instructor when the students have questions. So make sure to communicate to your students when you will be able to get back to them on specific questions. You also may want to ask your students to review the video by a specific date as well. In many instances, there are analytics tied to these videos, so you can find out when your students viewed these videos, how long they viewed these videos for, and if you have questions about these topics, make sure to contact the Center for E-Learning if you are using services such as Kaltura here at Valdosta State University. So you may be asking yourself by now, which modality should I choose? Video conferencing or video recording? Well, here are some questions to consider while choosing. First, what concepts do you want the students to learn? In some instances, some concepts are easier to learn through a video recording rather than video conferencing. For example, if you are going through a software demonstration, then you might want to do a video recording that walks the students through how to work with the content on the software. And then maybe you want to do a video conferencing session later on to allow students to ask questions. You will find a lot of times when it comes to working with specific hardware or software, the students might pause these videos a lot, which is very beneficial when it comes to video recording. And they're familiar with this type of content when they've gone to places like YouTube for tutorials. Next, you want to ask yourself, well, what active learning activities can I integrate with the lesson? Some are going to be easier to do in a live environment where you're asking the students to provide immediate feedback. So that's where video conferencing is going to come into effect. However, if you are asking your students to complete a particular assignment after consuming the content that is in the video, then that's probably going to be more so leaning towards video recording. Another question to ask, does everyone need to be in the same space at the same time? So that's where if everybody needs to be in the same, quote, space, then we're really talking about video conferencing, because we're saying that they need to be in the class environment and be able to interact with each other at that point in time. However, if they don't need to be all together at the same time, then video recording is probably going to be your best option. Another question to ask, do you want to feature photos, animations, or any other audiovisual content in addition to showing yourself on screen? If this is the case, then I strongly recommend using video recording. The reason for this is that the more media content that you incorporate into your lessons, the more bandwidth it's going to take, which could disadvantage some students if you are using video conferencing for that particular lesson. So when you want to incorporate a lot of videos, photos, animations, or any of that other content, please strongly consider using video recording. It is going to help your students a lot, and it's probably going to assist you as the instructor so you receive less questions or less concerns about being able to stream the content in a live environment. And finally, how quickly do you need to distribute the content to your students? As you all know, if you need to get something out there to your students immediately during class time, video conferencing is probably going to be your best option because you can do it very quickly. However, if you have a moment to structure out the message, develop the content, then I would strongly recommend using video recording as that approach. Another situation to think about is that if you need to get an announcement out to your students immediately and you think video is the best option, then you could develop that video very quickly on something like your cell phone and then post a link to that video on any platform you want, such as Microsoft Teams, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, BlazeView, or however else you communicate with your students. I would recommend, though, that you limit yourself to about 1 to 2 platforms maximum to prevent confusion with your students. Next, we're going to take a look at some best practices related to each one of these teaching techniques. Now we're going to take a look at a comparison of best practices as it relates to video conferencing and video recording. So first, let's start with video conferencing. As we spoke about earlier, any resources that you plan to use during class need to be both posted and prepared prior to class. Okay, when I say prepared, it means that we as teachers need to make sure that we have all of our plans for how to use maybe specific platforms and or readings or photos or anything like that prepared before class sessions. Then it can be useful to post those resources for our students in some instances. Next, you may want to consider creating what I call a game plan to provide a clear structure and communicate expectations to students. This can be done just with a Microsoft Word document where you just post every single day what are you going to cover in class and what the homework assignment is going to be. You may want to consider posting this for the first couple minutes of class each day, and that can make a reason for students to make sure that they get to class on time so that they see that content. I found this to be very beneficial in my own teaching after receiving this tip from another colleague. Next, make sure to establish the communication guidelines, such as when students want to speak or ask a question, then maybe have them use the raise hand feature. You could also ask them to post messages in the chat. However, some teachers have found that in really large class sections, this can be unwieldy and very difficult to manage. You might want to consider asking a student to serve as an assistant if you find that is occurring, but it is up to you as an instructor how you move forward with that. Another recommendation that comes from Cynthia Brame is to use weeding. What this means is make sure that when you're delivering a lesson, get out all the extraneous information that is maybe somewhat relative to the topic, but it doesn't get at the learning goals that you have for a particular lesson. Once again, this is going to require more planning on your part, but one way to get around this is to make sure to create an outline before a class and try not to stray away from that outline if possible. Another best practice is to pause and solicit feedback every 10 to 15 minutes. This is a way to see if the students are understanding the content that you are speaking about and that they can take advantage of the concepts and techniques in their own work as well. You may even want to consider putting alarms on your phone, whether they be silent or even on a smartwatch, to help pace yourself with these feedback opportunities. Another thing to think about is how can your students contribute content with active learning activities as recommended by Clara Galan. So this is where you may ask students to contribute in ways such as having a whiteboard that's interactive so that your students can write messages or even draw out concepts for the rest of the students in the class to check for understanding of specific concepts. Another big thing is make sure to pay really close attention to what screen or application is being presented to your students. I'm sure many of you have taught lessons where for about 5 or maybe 10 minutes, you thought you were presenting certain content to your class, and you find out at the end of the day that only your students face-to-face could see some of the content, while the remote students could not see such content. So make sure to pay close attention to that. And also try to build a habit of recording every class session. This can help a lot of our students who maybe miss a class day that are likely going to send you an email saying, "Hey, Professor so-and-so, did you record class so I could review the content that was there?" So you may want to put a post-it note on your computer to remember to record each one of these class sessions. And this can be done right through Blackboard Collaborate Ultra or Microsoft Teams at the click of a mouse. So now for video recording, let's talk about some best practices. First, chunk out those videos like we spoke about earlier. Try to limit them to about 5 to 15 minutes. Again, you can script them out, or you can use an outline to make sure that you are staying on topic. I would recommend having a description that your students read before the video that introduces them to what is going to be discussed and what the objective is of that video and or the learning goal that you have for them, so that way they understand why they're viewing the content. Next, make sure to provide a clear structure with your narrative, but avoid reading directly from the slides or script. So this is where you got to be careful with a script, is that it can sound like that you're just reading to your students rather than trying to engage them. So as you see here, in this presentation, I have a lot of bullet points here, but I'm constantly elaborating on them. So also avoid reading directly from slides. Do not put paragraphs of information on slides. The only time that should ever happen is if you are trying to reference a long quote. Otherwise, try to have short 1 to 2 line bullet points for your students in each class session. Another recommendation from Clara Galan is to provide opportunities for your students to pause for reflection and active learning. Sometimes you want to just give your students 5 minutes to reflect, maybe do a quick 1 minute write, and ask them to write about all the information that they've learned so far, and or maybe write down what the muddiest point is so that they can send it to you and you can figure out where maybe clarification is needed for specific topics. Next, make sure to integrate assessments for students to complete after watching each one of the recorded lectures. This can come in the form of simply a BlazeU quiz. There are also even video quizzes you can do now with Kaltura, which we'll speak about later on. Also, consider using video recordings in conjunction with any assigned readings that you're asking your students to read, or even just other videos as well. This helps, again, personalize the learning experience and lets you get an opportunity as the instructor to clarify certain content in the reading. A lot of times we collect readings for our students that we want them to look at specific things in the reading, and we're hoping that they take away certain content. But sometimes we might want to make sure to incorporate a video of us talking about that to make sure that point got across to our students. Another recommendation that comes from Flower Darby and James Lane is to consider using cell phones for recording mid or end week announcements. Especially in an online course, some students don't get to connect as much with you as the instructor. So sometimes the use of a cell phone video, or you could use your webcam on your computer, allows for a more personal experience and humanizes who you are for your students. And a lot of our students are craving connection, especially at times like these. And then finally, another recommendation from Flower Darby and James Lane is to consider giving your students video feedback. You can even do this just with specific assignments. Some instructors have even noted that this saves them a lot of time writing, when in many instances they could record a short video like this to provide good feedback for their students. So next we're going to take a look at the different skill levels for making video recorded lectures. So now we're going to take a look at some different skill levels for making video recorded lectures. So level 1, it's going to be creating informal videos. That's where you might just be recording some sort of announcement for your students, but it doesn't involve a full-on lesson just yet. Next, in level 2, you'd start embedding slides like you see here today in this presentation, which provides a visual guide for your students in terms of what you are discussing. Once you get up to level 3, then that's where you're starting to chunk out your content. You're starting to be more aware of the timing of the videos and focusing your efforts in each one of those videos. And you even start adding calls to action, which are asking your students to complete certain tasks along the way. In level 4, you're going to start integrating interactive tools. So this is where you're asking your students to complete certain tasks, and that when they take an action, there's something that happens as a reaction along the way. And then at the final level is when you would start incorporating assessment into your video recorded lectures, where, for example, you may have something in the video that students need to retain to complete an assignment afterward. So these are some skill levels for you to consider in just a moment. So now I would like you to take the next 5 minutes to reflect on your skill level and where you feel you fall on that pyramid. But I also want you to think about how you can increase your skills based on some of the information that we have spoken about today. So take 5 minutes and reflect. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to take some time to learn about active learning strategies today. So now we're going to take a look at a few different active learning strategies for video recorded lectures. The first active learning strategy I wanted to speak about is chunking content. And this recommendation comes from Cynthia Brain, who is referenced on a lot of pages throughout the United States at universities with Centers for E-Learning and Centers for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, similar to Valdosta State University. So the recommendation is when you're recording videos to not go any longer than 15 minutes. And sometimes they're going to be called micro lectures. If you need to create multiple videos, make sure to focus each one of the videos on specific topics and make sure that you have different sets of learning goals for each one of those videos. Consider what you've seen so far today. You've noticed that with each one of the videos that you see appear, they're connected to an individual slide. This allows me as an instructor to focus on specific topics for the duration of that video. So try to take this into your own teaching in this upcoming semester. The next active learning strategy for video recorded lectures is to consider integrating note-taking slides. This is a recommendation that comes from Flower Darby and James Lane. So again, this is where you're trying to chunk out your content. So consider having videos that your students view and then provide them with slides where there are blank sections that they need to fill in. That's a way to make sure that your students are engaging with the video because maybe there's certain content they need to see or hear to be able to complete such slides, and then that activity could be assessed for your course. That's an example of actively engaging your students in your course. Another active learning strategy to consider is using shout-out graphics. So this is a recommendation from Cynthia Brain, which I actually had personal success with this past semester. So this is where you create graphics that grab the viewer's attention, which would be our students in this instance, that maybe identifies particular key terms or concepts and directs our students to that information. As you see here, there's a screenshot from the one of the HighFlex videos from earlier this semester that you see at the bottom right-hand portion of this slide. It can be as simple as a small post-it note. You could create these in Adobe Spark Video, Adobe Premiere Pro. I could even see somebody trying to make these inside of Microsoft PowerPoint. One of the most important things is to make sure that the graphics are legible. The way to do this is to make sure that you have a lot of contrast. So for example, part of the reason that that post-it note probably stuck out to people is how large it is, but also that black text on the yellow background is an example of a lot of contrast going on. So if anyone is wanting to learn more about Adobe Premiere Pro, make sure to contact the New Media Center, which frequently offers workshops regarding this platform. The final active learning strategy I'd like to discuss is active learning and assessment. So we frequently want to check to see if our students complete specific tasks, and we want to move them to a higher order of thinking. So one way of doing this is we can add questions and or a video quiz using Kaltura, which is available in BlazeView. We can also integrate active learning activities such as pausing for thinking and writing reflections as well. So at the bottom of this slide, you can see a screenshot from Kaltura that shows the creation of a video quiz occurring. You would need to supply the video, and you can actually integrate videos from external resources such as YouTube if you wanted to as well. So Omer Varel found that if teachers do embed questions in videos, then it's seen to improve the student's performance on subsequent quizzes as well. So another tool that you could try to use, not listed here, is called HapYak. And if you go to happyak.com, and you can spell that HAPYAK.com, that's another example of a platform that is going to allow you to have interactive video elements inside of your lessons. So make sure to give some of these strategies a try in your next classes during this upcoming semester. All right, everybody. So now let's take a shot at bringing everything full circle here. So I want you to take 5 minutes to reflect on this webinar and list 3 things that you learned about the pedagogy of video conferencing versus video recording. Take some time to reflect on this, and please consider recommending this video to your peers at this institution or at other institutions so that they can even learn more about the differences of using video conferencing versus video recording. So as we wrap things up, I wanted to make sure that I provided some additional resources for all of you if you're wanting to learn more information about some of the software and concepts that we discussed today. So first, 2 free Who Knew It training courses that I would recommend to you all, which you all have free access as VSU faculty, and you can access these via the portal in My VSU, is try out the digital video in the classroom and the instructional video best practices. Even if you've been teaching online for a while, I think you'll learn something new, as I did while reviewing these resources. Next, if you'd like to learn more about Adobe Premiere Pro, I provided a link here on the screen. Feel free to hit pause and write down this link. Another place to go for support is the New Media Center, which once again offers workshops for Adobe Premiere Pro. And if you'd like to learn more about Kaltura, please consider visiting the BlazeU 101 course that you all have access to as VSU faculty. And then afterward, I would recommend contacting the Center for E-Learning, who can provide a lot of support for you to help get you going inside of Kaltura. And finally, I'd like to thank each one of you for taking the time to view this webinar today. I hope it was really helpful. I provided a list of references here for those of you who want to learn more about some of the content that we discussed in today's video. I wish you all the best of luck in your courses, and please remember, contact the Center for E-Learning and/or the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching to improve on your teaching to assist your students. Take care.